Yeah.
I know it was good
Well, as I have said many times, one of the blessings of my life is presenting Abraham Lincoln and all the wonderful folks that I've gotten acquainted with, which includes you folks too, of course. I'm so pleased to have John here with us, John Gurnish, and you might be interested. In 1961, he was a fifth grader, and that was when the country was marking the 100th anniversary of the start of the Civil War. By the way, that's the year I graduated from college, so I let you figure out how old I am. And well, John began to study the Civil War and found out all that he could. He is a retired Ellett High School history teacher, and Ellett is east of Akron, if you're not familiar with that. And by the way, his wife, Becky, is sitting back here in the back corner, and Becky, she taught both history and Spanish. So I'm sure that theirs was a match made in heaven. And John has spent his life since he was in the fifth grade digging into the subject and getting to know the people from the Akron area who fought in the Civil War. In his own artifacts, documents, and photographs of local men line the walls of the first floor library and a museum-style room in his basement. And John said it's because they were from here and they were local people, just ordinary people who served in these big events that we read about in history. John did graduate from Springfield High School. He received his undergrad degree in education from the University of Akron and his master's degree from Kent State University. And he believes he has collected items and stories of nearly 70 area Civil War veterans. Many of those people are buried in graveyards in Summit County. And John and Becky have one son, Nathaniel, who's married to Rachel, and they have 4 grandchildren, which are all boys, grandsons, Jackson, Jedediah, Ike, Ezekiel, and also their granddaughter, Charleston. And John has written books. He has some of them available up here, which we can do afterwards. And the North-South Traders Civil War magazine was an article that he helped to write. And he authored O Generous Southern Hospitality, and captured images. John just said he has been doing Civil War stuff for 40 years. I've been doing it for 20 years. I thought that was a long time. Well, he did portray a Civil War soldier in the 1993 Inventors Hall of Fame induction ceremony for John Erickson. And I'm sure that's enough of me. So John, we're so pleased to have you here. Everybody keep your fingers crossed that everything works.
I am sure General Grant did not have this problem with technology like we had tonight trying to set up, but we'll go on. Thank you for having me tonight. I spent 35 and a half years in Akron's public schools, and I put many a student to sleep in my class. So if anybody wants to sleep tonight, I'll understand. Franklin S. Case became a subject for me in 1975 when I purchased a collection of his artifacts, including his diary for the summer of 1864. And I will read tonight some excerpts from that diary, and I will show you some of the things that I collected in that, and some of the other things that I've purchased since then. I got one photograph when I bought the collection in 1975, and now I own 4 original photographs of Case just by diligent looking and knowing what to look for and having people look for me for things. And that's the thing, I've enjoyed collecting since the 1960s. And I've taken my collecting and I've turned it into my research. And I like to research the people that I have things from. I like to know the background. I like to know who the people were. And so Franklin Case is probably the person I've spent the most time on, obviously since 1975. And I decided to finally put it into a book in 2014, and it's up here if you want to look at it. It goes way more in depth than what I will do tonight. It will give you a better idea of who Franklin S. Case, the man, was, and what he thought, and what happened to him, especially in the summer of 1864. Franklin S. Case was born in Wellington in Lorain County. This is a map from 1874 of Wellington, and his family lived on West Liberty Street. They're right here on the map. This is where his house sat. And here's the house a few years ago when I took this. That is still standing and privately owned. I was told when I was in Wellington this summer that it has come up for sale a couple of times and changed hands, but it's still there. And it was interesting for me to go find it a number of years ago on the west side of town, on really the edge of town. And part of the reason is that Frank Case's father, John Case, was a tanner. And tanning required water, and there's a stream next to it. And it also had a lot of smells associated with it. And so they moved the tannery as far out of town as possible so as not to offend the neighbors. So that's part of the reason why they were located there. Now, John S. Case, who's shown here in the county history, then was a farmer, but primarily a tanner. And as a tanner, he took the hides of cows and he made them into shoes, largely, but also repaired shoes. He made reins and harnesses for horses, and it's even recorded in his day book that he made bellows for various iron workers and so on. So he made all kinds of things out of leather, and that is the home that Franklin Case grew up in. And he learned some of the trade of his father as he did. His father married Diantha Blair in 1832. They would have 4 children. Celia was the oldest, Helen, Frank, and the youngest then was Emma. And Frank was born December 21st, 1838. And this is where they were living at the time in the house that we just saw. Franklin Seward Case was then baptized into the Congregational Church July 5th, 1839. John S. Case, his father, was a deacon in that church for 50 years. So that was quite a long time. He was kind of a pillar in the community as he served there, as he worked there. Unfortunately, the Case family suffered a disaster when Diantha died in 1848. And so Franklin was barely 9 years old at that time. And within 2 years, John S. Case then remarried Lucinda and Lucinda Ely in 1850. They would have 2 more children. One died in infancy and one died at age 6. So they never grew up to adulthood. The original 4 Case children grew to adulthood. In Wellington Cemetery, this is the grave of John and Lucinda Case. John died in 1896. Now, Franklin, the subject of our story, is shown here in an ambrotype, I believe, taken in 1861, likely in Cleveland at the very beginning of the war, as his unit, the 2nd Ohio Cavalry, was in training. They were Company H, formed in Wellington, and they elected Frank Case as 2nd lieutenant. He was 3rd in command of the company. Company H consisted of about 100 men. Those 100 men went to Cleveland, Camp Wade, and there they were joined with 9 other companies, actually 11 other companies, and they would form then the 2nd Ohio Cavalry in September of 1861. This is Frank in his 2nd lieutenant's uniform. You can tell he's 2nd lieutenant by the shoulder straps on his shoulders. They have no bars or any insignia on the inside. They have a border of embroidery, or in this case, false embroidery, brass, and then they have a yellow insert into them. And then they would put the rank on it. If it had no bars, no other insignia, it was a 2nd lieutenant, the lowest officer you could be. So I believe this was taken there. There were many photographers in Cleveland to take pictures, and I'm sure that many of the people, soldiers, went into town, had their photographs taken for their families back at home. At the training, the Cleveland Herald newspaper described Company H as being made up of the best young men of Lorain County. And many of them were somewhat educated. Like Frank Case, he had gone to Oberlin College and went 2 years, 1859 to 61.